everybody. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa. Today, we've got on the line Will Korte. Will, you've been in the fishing industry for quite a while. You started out in college when you were doing some education around PR and writing, etc. Spent quite a bit of time actually with some local magazines, or I would say coastal magazines, which is called the Angler magazine, pretty well commonly known publication. You then went back to school, did some more PR, always kind of stayed in the fishing industry, and it kept your attention, I think, probably because of your passion for fishing and maybe more likely your location. You're just surrounded by it. So, you did some other things too, some really cool stuff. You have the 727 Angler blog that you run, writing articles all the time with regard to fishing. So if you guys want to check that out. Today's call, we're going to talk about where you live and really the value of that area, and that's Tampa Bay. There's quite a bit of diversity of the types and styles of fishing in your location, and I think it does a couple of things. One, it's a great destination. You can go fish for all kinds of different species, types, approaches, etc. But not only that, as an angler, it really, for you, you've mentioned it's prepared you quite a bit for going out and tackling other areas and feeling really confident. So we're going to talk about that. And then the last, we're going to talk about a little tip that I really love, and that is the expectation of not landing a tarpon. And what that really means, and some of the tips and techniques that you have from your tarpon experience, which you've said, hey, Christian, I'm not a tarpon expert, but I've got a little of a lot of everything. And tarpon is one of those things around here that's, it's a great thing to go after, and I've learned quite a bit from. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. So, Will, great to have you on the show. Again, if you guys want to check out his blog at 727 Angler, that's a good one to check out. And let's get into this, man. Let's talk some fishing.
Let's do it. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Good to have you on the show. So let's talk about the Tampa Bay area. You had mentioned, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here. Everything from all the saltwater experience in the Bay, which can be super tricky, and a great learning experience, to traveling. Whether it's north to South Carolina or south down into the islands, et cetera, the Bahamas, and then also heading south in Florida and doing some peacock fishing, et cetera. So drop into that and let's get rolling.
Oh yeah, I mean Tampa Bay is just insane with what you can get here. I grew up outside of the city proper in a town called Palm Harbor, and now I live in the actual city. I went to school in the city, and you're surrounded by water. If you want redfish all year round, if you want snook almost all year round, black drum in the summer, we get the gigantic black drum on the bridges, tarpons pretty much year round, offshore, 3 different kinds of groupers, 3 or 4 different types of snappers, kingfish, we've got bluefish, big jack crevalles. I mean, pretty much you name it, we have it. Every type of shark except maybe, tiger shark. That's pretty rare. But, barracudas, pretty much if it swims,
it's in the bay.
It's totally in the bay. And I mean, back in the day, before, a lot of changes happened, you hear the old stories about people catching bonefish and permit even. And every now and again, it seems like in the wintertime, you'll see somebody, I actually know somebody who caught an inshore permit, and you see people catch bonefish. It's rare, but it's just one of those things that happens, and you just shake your head and you're like, I can't believe we have this much diversity here. It's an incredible fishery.
Yeah. What, when did you get really involved in the fishing locally? Were you a kid and that kind of sparked it for you?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing. I used to go as a kid with my family, and neither my mother or my father grew up fishing. They're from New York and Michigan, respectively, which has, fishing in its own right, but they weren't really into fishing. But it took me as a kid, and I would catch pinfish, and, it would be good, but I just didn't have the patience for it. And I started playing ice hockey, and just ran out of time, just kind of stopped fishing until high school, where it was sort of like the popular thing to do, and a lot of kids fished, and I had some friends that fished, and I fell into it, and you know, I decided, I want to learn this. I remember being
Yeah.
at the Skyway Bridge with a Kmart rod, a giant spoon, no leader, big hunk of squid, and I caught a bonita. Thank God somebody had a bridge net. I couldn't believe it. It was the biggest fish I'd ever caught. It was the biggest fish I'd ever seen. And
Yeah.
there at 16, I decided I want to learn how to do this. I want this feeling all the time. The rest is history.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then you went to school, you started writing about it, doing all kinds of things, and it came out. You were, some people would say fortunate, but I bet you put the work in and you got into some good organizations that really led you down that path. So you had mentioned the Angler magazine avenue, etc. Then you did some things with Skinny Water Culture, etc. And it sounds like those really accelerated you. But you took that knowledge, and it sounds like you started to travel. Talk a little bit
Mhm.
about some of your trips. Like you said, I would go up and target reds a little north. I would go down to the
Mhm.
southern Florida, and you give us some insight on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's basically every step of the way I would meet someone who was very helpful to me, very nice to me, was willing to lend a hand and answer questions. And, as time goes on and your life goes on and you end up going to different places. And one of my very good friends, he was working on a PhD at the University of Florida, and he had a polling skiff, and I would go up there and visit him at UF, and we would drag that thing over to Bacasa, to Cedar Key, Homosassa, Ozello, all the nature coast towns. We'd go to Steenahatchee to go scalloping. You know, I got another buddy here who's got a polling skiff, and we drag that thing down south to, Miami area and the Glades. And, that's one of the great things about Tampa is it's on the coast, and we've got a lot here, but we have Tampa International Airport right here, so you can get anywhere. And the Homosassa area is about an hour drive. The Naples area, it's about 3 hours. Miami's 4 hours. It's just a great location, and as you progress through life and you get involved with different opportunities and meet different people, you can get into some cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the diversity's high, and I haven't fished a ton in Florida. I
Hmm.
fished around the Miami area, and then
Hmm.
south of Miami, in the Everglades, and in and around that area. But I remember my first trip down there as an adult and fishing in Miami Bay, and just
Hmm.
I was flabbergasted. I didn't think of or imagine that kind of water was in Florida. I
Yeah,
mean, I was just like, wait, this is like crystal
yeah,
clear water like you see on
yeah.
TV. I thought that was, only Hawaii or like,
Hmm.
some crazy atoll or whatever. But it's like literally right there in Miami. And it's the fishing is so underrated in Florida, in the States. I think other people from other countries is what they realize the quality there, but
Hmm.
to have that and then on top of it have all that other stuff that you talked about, like the other coastal areas where you have these great redfish fisheries or the other species, but then you have inland like peacock fishing and whatnot too. So
Oh yeah.
really cool area. You're pretty
Yep.
fortunate to be there. I want to come back down and do some trips. So
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you can drive it, you can fish the whole way down. You take the Tamiami Trail down to Miami, stop at the side of the road, catch peacocks, largemouth, tarpon, and snook all out of the same little canal, and then you'll
yeah,
see an alligator sitting on the bank.
right. That's what we were doing.
Yeah, well,
It
it's
was awesome. And then you have frog legs for lunch. This is great.
hmm. Hmm. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about you have a passion for some of that southern stuff, the peacock fishing in particular. Let's chat about that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's one of those things that I remember when I first saw it, I just couldn't believe what I was looking at, how crazy those fish were. And I remember going down to the Keys. It was maybe my second trip down there, I think. And I went a day early to devote a whole day to trying to find these fish because there's a lot of water down there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is if you're in the right area, meaning, I mean, you can find them in Naples on this coast, on my coast, but if once you start hitting Broward and even Palm Beach County now, you can pretty much find them in a puddle. And they're the most hyper aggressive, mean fish. They hit with absolute steel, and the males have this big hump on their head, and just the colors and how they will literally eat each other. The fly I throw is a Peacock Bass pattern. They will eat each other. They pile on top of each other to try to chase your fly down. And, occasionally they'll eat it, spit it out, but most of the time they're going to choke it down. They'll run. They give you jumps. If you haven't caught one and you've caught a snook, it's more like hooking a snook than hooking a largemouth bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that really enchanted me about it is the fact that it's the Wild West down there. There's all kinds of crazy fish you can catch in the same bodies of water. And that's something that always appealed to me, is the fact that, I could catch peacock in here, but I could also jump a tarpon, and also I could catch something that is just totally off the wall, like a clown knife.
Yeah, or cichlids, or gar,
Mm-hmm.
or
you
just go down the list. Yeah, Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally cool. And I like how you described the aggressiveness of them.
Oh yeah,
they will, like, you'll hook one and you'll see another one chasing it down trying to eat it.
oh yeah, and then your buddies just throw a fly right there, and they'll come eat that,
and it'll turn off. It's
mm-hmm.
yeah,
it's
really cool. And I think the other thing that's really, and I'd like to hear your perspective on it, but when I was there, we did a lot of sight fishing.
Yes, absolutely. If you're going to fly fish for them, that's the best way to do it. You'll see them bedding, you'll see them there on the shorelines. If you see a drain pipe, drag it from the drain pipe. That's fine too. You might not see them, but they can be there. You see these deep, dark canals. That's fine if you want to throw baits or, deep diving plug. You can definitely hook them. Some of those canals are 30 feet deep. I mean, they find cars at the bottom of them, and it's seriously, it's one of those things that it's very visual, which is super cool. And it's sort of one of those things that you'll know pretty quickly if you're in them or not.
Yeah. It was real interesting because we drove that road. You had said the name is something with a T,
Tamiami Trail.
Yeah, Tamiami Trail. And there's canals all over the place, bodies of water. But it was interesting. We would pull over, our approach was pull over and go scout fish. Yeah. And if you saw fish, it was a fishy area. And if you didn't, it was like just drive another 10 minutes, pull over at the next pull out, and you would get out. And like you said, they'd be bedded in. You'd look in the rocks. You could see them bedded. Or you could see them cruising. And then next thing you know, it was like, all right, let's go get them. And it was funny for me because I showed up. I was really looking for saltwater fishing in Miami. So I had salt flies. I didn't have bass flies. I threw a gotcha all weekend and I crushed them.
I mean, those cloud minnows, they're something not smaller than they are. Typically you like those obnoxious neon colors, and yellow is a chartreuse, and, I throw a baby peacock pattern, but honestly, I've caught them on just pure white clouders. If they're fired up, then they'll just eat something that goes in front of their face.
Yeah, mine was a creamsicle gotcha. Creamsicle orange and white. It was like, and they were on top of it. It was really great.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. One of the things that got me really excited while I was down there, just from a power, was snakehead. I couldn't get over how strong those fish were. Have you fished for snakehead yourself down there?
Interestingly enough, I've only seen them, and they're everywhere, but I've personally only seen them in the Palm Beach area, and they can be, I've never caught one, I'll be honest with you, because they can be very, very spooky in that
Mm-hmm.
they'll see your shadow coming up the bank or going over the canal and they will dip like that. But from what I've heard, they're just dragons. Like they will just jet. Like
Yeah.
it's really something from what I've heard. I mean, almost like, hooking a carp, except for you know, the size difference, but they'll take you for a ride.
Yeah, it's a different kind of power from what I
Hmm.
experienced. Um,
Hmm.
the the thing that I thought was really interesting about them. We'll jump off this subject, but the way that I was approaching them, they were spooky, but they weren't like actively eating. They were like
Yeah.
territorially nipping at the fly. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was like
Yeah.
a very interesting
Yeah.
visual, like get it right in there. You're almost like threading them, and then they nip,
Hmm.
and you gotta like wham that hook set because their
Yeah.
jaw is so hard. But boy, when you hook into them, I mean, they were
Yeah.
like straightening hooks on me, and I was like, this is
Jeez.
absolutely
I
insane.
believe it. I mean, some of those guys, I saw one that had to be 4 feet long. Just like insanely massive. Like, I can't believe I'm looking at this thing. This is a snakehead.
And
You
they're like
know?
all muscle, just like
Oh, yeah.
it's
It's
like
one of
all
those.
tail. It's all tail.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Cool. Well, you do. You got a lot of things down there. We're going to jump back into the peacock thing, but let's talk about how we talked about you can visualize it, you can see it, you start to go maybe do some sight fishing, seeing them.
Mhm.
Um, you talked about some of the patterns you like to throw. What are some of the other ways that you like to catch them? Do you ever fish poppers? Do you ever pull different kind of bugs, etc.?
Mhm. Mhm.
Interested to hear that.
So, my big thing is you have to get it down to them. And I typically use a fly that has dumbbell eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I find that the splash of it hitting the water doesn't really bother them. And if they do dip out, don't worry, they're going to come back pretty soon.
Yep.
I have a friend who doesn't use dumbbell eyes, but he does some lead wraps around the hook, around the shank of the hook, and uses just a, you know, dub fly with, just bait fish imitation. I would imagine it would, those fish would eat a popper. My favorite thing to throw at largemouth is a just a frog fly, with
Mm-hmm.
spun deer hair. I've never thrown top waters for peacocks before, but I would imagine they would bulldog it. But when you can just see them so easily, it's too
It's too
simple,
good
I
to
guess.
yeah.
Just walk them on
Right.
the head and watch them come up and kill it.
Yeah. Right. Right. I found too like you said I fished dumbbell eyes when I was doing
Hmm.
it, and heavy leader. There's no leader shyness.
Hmm.
So that's at least for me my
Hmm.
expectation. And then
Hmm.
I was doing a lot of like jig style stripping, rod tip
Okay.
high, like a 3-inch strip, wham wham, making that thing jig, let it
Yeah,
sink.
make it
Let
move. Don't be
yeah
afraid that they're gonna chase it down.
yeah yeah. So very cool, very cool. What about some of the other smaller species and different things in those waters when you head south? What are you doing there?
Well, lion cichlids for sure. You'll see those guys. Those are pretty common. Um, we have them all the way up here in ponds too now.
Hmm.
Crazy. My dad caught one on a shrimp in Tampa Bay, actually, which is crazy.
Hmm.
Uh, but you'll catch largemouths. There's a bass. Oh, it's actually not a bass. It's a cichlid. I'm sorry, but people call them jaguar bass. They're common down there. There's a cichlid called a Midas cichlid. It's bright orange. It's got a big hump on his head.
Hmm.
There's 5 or 6 tilapia species. Um, you name it, you can find it in a pond down there.
Yeah.
I haven't really caught too many of the exotics, aside from the peacocks. Again, I have a friend who used to live down there, and he's caught pretty much everything you can catch. But that's one of the things I love about it is you never really quite know how it's going to go down and what's going to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. When you started targeting the peacock,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that you were thinking of, like in relation to getting better at that? Were you thinking of different targeting techniques? Were you looking for bigger size? What was going through your head there?
So what I learned a lot, I just learned a lot of what didn't work. And I would go down there and I would see these canals. There's water everywhere. And sometimes I would see them. Sometimes I would, get them to follow or whatnot. And then they would turn and go head down into just the abyss. They would kick their tail and just disappear, And so kind of learning, coming to this idea of this isn't working. This is hard. What's going on? How do people catch these things all the time? And I think it's part of fishing in general is you have to put yourself into a good situation where you can win, so to speak. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm throwing an 8 weight with regular line, intermediate line, and a clouser, and I'm casting into a canal that's God knows how deep, where I literally can't see anything. I might see them on an edge, very fleeting, and then they disappear off a drop off that could be 30, 40, 50 feet deep, whatever it is. And so just restructuring, kind of changing the idea of how I'm going to target these if I'm using a fly rod. For instance, one of the most well-known places where people target these fish are in Miami airport lakes. I've seen those lakes. You could probably hide a plane underneath the water there. It's deep. It's dark. You know, it's not easy. It's not easy using a fly rod unless you see a stack of them sitting on the edge or something like that. So just sort of trial and error, learning, where these fish kind of hang out and their habits and what's going to give me the best chance to win.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. You really kind of just change the environment versus your
Mm-hmm.
technique per se, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the environment really led to your technique change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, let's bounce back to Tampa.
Sounds good.
You you got all this local water. You've been
Mm-hmm.
fishing it for a while, but now you're like, oh, I got to explore. So you head down south. You did your peacock
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but you did some stuff up north too. You were talking about I think it was the redfish fishing and the pickiness and how it's different than other regions. Can you walk
Yeah,
through that?
yeah. So the redfish in Tampa Bay see lures, flies, and baits 365 days a year. And hats off to the guides that can put fish in the boat. It's hard. It's very hard. I've seen them, I've fished for them, and I've gotten a lot of rejections. Um, Going up north to Chazawiska, Ozello, you know, Wakasasa, things like that. I mean, we've just piled fish in the boat before. I mean, it's still hard. You have to know how to pull. You have to be quiet. You have to know where you can and can't run, so you don't, blow out your lower unit, things like that. But it's I don't want to say it's more honest because I'm not quite sure that's the right word. But if you do things right and you put yourself in a good position, you can have really good days up there with a lot of nice fish. Tampa Bay, you can do everything right and you can have a dude on a jet ski just mess it all up for you. Or you do everything right and the fish decide that they just don't want to eat because this is the fourth time this day that the school's been hit and it's 10 o'clock.
Right, and it's weariness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
they're very difficult.
what's the water like in those little northern areas? Is the clarity is high? Is it a little darker than some of the other
It
areas?
depends. Jazz for me, I found it really depends on the wind. It can get pretty chalky at times. You'll see a lot of muds, from mullet schools, stingrays. Generally, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear depending on the day. The only place that I've found where the water's kind of it can be sort of that you're not going to have a chance to sight fish is at times in the glades. It
Hmm.
can be very dark, black water, iced tea colored water. But I think weather can kind of dictate that a little bit, depending on the salinity of where you are in the glades kind of impacts that as well.
And when you're running into fish in Tampa, I like to hear both sides, Tampa or the northern stuff. Is it onesie twosies, or is it schools more
It can be
common?
anything.
It can be
It can be
anything.
anything.
Yeah.
I've seen fish just, single tailer before. I've seen a wad of 10 fish, and I've seen two go this way, then one more goes this way, and then there's two snook with one trailing it, and then there's three trailing that. It can vary.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the things I love about redfish in general is, to me, it's one of the species where if you're starting in saltwater, you get a lot of exposure and you get a lot of shots. It's
Yes, I would agree with that.
great entry to saltwater because the opportunities are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're picky, but they're not always picky. Sometimes they're super aggressive.
Right.
You get the power, you get the running and fighting, you get the deep water fish, you get the shallow tailers. I mean, it's like you get this really wide variety. And bonefish are very much the same, but bonefish, in my opinion, far more picky. And far fewer shots are faster moving in general. All those little things that start to stack up to make them a little bit harder, right? So
I agree with everything you just said. I mean, redfish, they're pretty reliable, right? Pretty much year round. They'll eat a lot of different things. They get giant, you can fish them offshore, pretty much in every corner of the state. They can be hard, but also not impossible, good first fish.
God was just talking to you with the thunder.
I completely agree with that. And they fight hard, and they're pretty and cool. And I have eaten some in my life, and they do taste really good.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, man, there is nothing like having 20 feet off the boat or less a red coming straight at you, watching the gill flare and the flick of the tail and that chomp. It is like that wide kind of barreled head. Those gills are just like wham, and then all of a sudden that thing takes off like a rocket towards your fly, and you're like, "Did you not see that?"
Yeah. Absolutely. And they're everywhere too. I've caught them in St. Augustine. I've caught them in Chaz. I've caught them in Tampa. I've caught them in the Keys. It's always awesome.
Yeah, and they're so hardy. I mean, you can pick them up and handle them, and you get the hook out, and it's like it doesn't even faze them.
They're tough fish for sure.
Yeah, you'll see them. Sometimes you'll catch them. They'll have big holes in them from birds or rips in them from who knows what, the props or whatever, and they're like, yeah, that's no big deal, man.
I mean, they eat crabs and a lot of finfish, and that's a lot of stuff that can poke you and poke your throat, and they crush them.
Yeah, great fish to target. So, well, that's really cool, man. The diversity in that area of Tampa is really high. It sounds like it set you up. You talked a little bit too. Tell me how some of that fishing has really set you up for your trout fishing, because you spoke to that a little bit.
Yeah. Last year I spent some time in Blue Ridge, Georgia. I just booked a flight, took a red eye up there, and got an Airbnb in the middle of the woods, by myself, dirt roads, everything closed down at 8, I was just outside of Blue Ridge proper. I wasn't in the downtown area. That stays open a little later, but, really out there. And I got hooked up with this guy I saw on TV on the Saltwater Experience TV show, that show that Tom Rowland does. And I just messaged the guy on Instagram, got it set up. And it was, people, when they trout fish, I know there's wild fish, stockfish, and different things, but a lot of times people will, catch a trout that's 10 inches long and be, ecstatic about that, or 12 inches long. I mean, these were 25-inch rainbow trout. I mean, it was preposterous. And I mean, it's a little different with the way the current works, as far as, you don't want to let them get past you and get in the current, and then you're not going to be able to turn them, that sort of thing. You've got overhanging trees in certain areas, but just the idea of, you've got to put this fly in this current rip, and, mending the line, that was a little learning curve, but just the idea of, you need to put this fly in this area so that it's going to drift over these fish. And once you do that, I mean, you hook one, and I mean, it's incredible. It's so cool. I mean, those fish fight hard. They're beautiful, and just the vistas that you see when you're up there, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear someone come from the saltwater side to the
Mhm.
freshwater side. It's a different um, approach, right? Most of the
Yeah.
guys that I talk to, it's the other way. Like they started out trout fishing and then they
Mhm.
went to saltwater, and that's really refreshing to hear it come from the other side. It's different
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah. And I went up there. It was cold. Oh, it was cold. I went up there in December or January, I think, and I'm wearing waders, which, believe it or not, in Florida here, I do own a pair of waders. I do use them occasionally, but oh God, it was cold. But it was so much fun. I
Yeah,
recommend everybody, if you haven't done that, you should do that.
yeah.
Try and go catch yourself a rainbow or a brown somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. It's worth it. Both sides are very fun,
Mm.
and they're different. They got their subtleties.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
And I
different.
mean, you're throwing a 5 weight. You're
Right,
going real
right.
light. Four
Yeah.
5 weights.
Which in Florida you probably don't carry anything less than an 8 weight. I would assume most of the time.
I have an 8 weight. I got buddies that throw 5 and 6 weights when we do the peacock thing. I actually
Right.
have a buddy who's a 4 weight,
Mm-hmm.
and he used to take that peacock fishing. Anytime you can lighten things up, it makes it fun, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Get that thing bent. You know, rainbow
Oh
flowing
yeah,
for
oh
you.
yeah,
So
definitely.
let's jump into the last part here,
Okay.
and that's your hey, expect to drop or lose a tarpon.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
and what your theory is there.
yeah, so we basically have year-round tarpon fishery here, and whether that's in lights, whether that's just knowing where to find them occasionally, and it'll be out in the flats or whatever it is. I mean, they'll go offshore, but we basically do. We have resident fish, and they're here all year round. And a lot of times, you hear people when they tarpon fish, we went 1 for 4. We went 3 for 5, whatever it is, and you're expected to lose more fish than you catch. Okay, fine. Well, let's make sure that at least when you actually get one of these things to eat, because I've definitely gone out there and looked at fish who've just looked at me and just laughed at my fly. So you actually get one of these things to eat. Let's make sure that you do your part to make sure you get those numbers up. And this goes back to the early days of Homosassa with Tom Evans and Stu Apt and all those guys who were going up there chasing the world record tarpon. And Stu Apt did this thing, down and dirty. Basically, what it means is this: don't don't relish a long fight with one of these fish. It's going to get eaten by a shark. It's going to wear through the leader. It's going to spit your fly. It's going to bend out your hook. It's going to break you off on a bridge piling. Fly's just going to come unbuttoned. You're going to make a mistake and step on your fly line or something. Like, the
Right.
longer you have this fish on, the more that can go wrong. So you've gone through this effort. You found the fish. You've gotten one to eat. Just put the pedal to the metal. Palm the reel if you have to. You have to fight him, and you have to fight him hard. You want to whip this guy and get him to
Yeah.
the boat before he finds a way to break you off. And people are scared, oh, I'm going to break him off if I put too much pressure on him. But all those factors that I just listed, it's a much higher chance you're going to lose a fish to any of those things than putting the pedal to the metal and getting this guy to the boat as quickly as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. What when you talk about putting the pedal to the metal,
Mhm.
describe in detail some of the things you're doing there.
Mhm. Well, I think you got to be aggressive. They roll and they get their oxygen, and that just gives them new life. You gotta turn him. You gotta pull the opposite way. Keep his head down. Don't let him get his head out and get that gulp of air. That gives him energy.
Mm-hmm.
You palm the reel if you have to. You hopefully not fishing alone. I wouldn't recommend it. If you have to, have your buddy drive up on him a little bit. Get your reels in whatever you can. It's of course, it's a little bit of a battle and a dance, and they're gonna take some line, but just go at him, go after him. Don't be afraid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about losing him, because even if you by chance you do lose him, you do break one off, just have to go hook another one anyway, whether you're
right.
releasing them on your own terms or not.
Right. And my experience with tarpon has been, whether you land them or not, it's a pit bull on the end of your line, and that is
Mm-hmm.
a whole hell of a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's just a few seconds. I mean, it's just it's something you got to experience once in your life. I really firmly believe that. I mean, the first eat I ever had by one, I remember with a buddy of mine, and
mm-hmm.
our jaws were dropped. We just couldn't believe that first initial take, and then the throttling in the air, and just like absolute
the rattling of the gill plates.
Man.
Yeah. You hear those gill plates shaking around. It's a very unique sound, and it doesn't matter how big or how small they are. They do that, and it's just so cool. Just
it's a train wreck for a few seconds, and then like you said, you get into that. Oh my gosh, I gotta land this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. Like all of a sudden you're going downhill, because your mind is just thinking land. I love how you said, don't worry about it, man. Just freaking throttle them, put the pedal to the metal, and do the classic things you would. Bow to them when they jump, turn your rod tip down. Do all those things, but at the same time, don't be afraid of them, and just put the wood to him, take him behind the woodshed, and go to work.
Yeah. If you let him do whatever you want, he's going to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
So it's not what you want if you want to win and get this fish in the boat.
They're the Silver Kings for a reason.
That's right.
Well, Will, hey man, great having you on the show. Love talking Tampa and fishing, and I'm going to come down there and do some more in Florida. That's a great fishery. It was really cool hearing your experiences and the different angle that you brought to the table today. So, if you guys want to get a hold of Will, check him out at 727 Angler. That's his blog. Will, it was great talking to you, man. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for having me.
You got it.
Take care.